The Galactic Union had existed for 3,000 years, and in all that time, no species had ever forgotten the Dracorian She were the dragons of the stars. Massive beings covered in scales that burned with inner fire. Creatures who had once conquered half the galaxy before turning their rage upon themselves. Now only one remained. His name was Zorith, and he lived alone on a dead moon called Vexor Prime, surrounded by the bones of his world and the ghosts of his memories. The other species watched him from a distance, too afraid to approach, too afraid to attack, hoping that if they left him alone, he would simply fade away like the rest of his kind in the great council chamber of the Galactic Union. Representatives from 200 species argued about what to do with the last dragon. He is a threat to all civilized life, shouted High Council of Rex of the Tyrellian people, his forearms waving in agitation. My ancestors watched the Dracorians burn entire worlds. We cannot allow this creature to exist. And what would you have us do? Asked Ambassador Kira Walsh, the human representative, her voice calm but firm. Attack him? The last fleet that tried to destroy a Dracorian lost 15,000 ships in a single day. The chamber fell silent at her words. Everyone remembered the Dracorian Wars. Even those species who had not been born yet, when the fires finally stopped burning, the dragons had been unstoppable. Their scales harder than any metal, their breath hot enough to melt starships, their rage endless and terrible. Only their own civil war had ended their conquest. As they turned on each other with the same fury they had shown the galaxy now, Zara sat alone on his moon, the last of his kind, and no one knew what to do about him far from the council chamber. Commander Lisa Morgan stood on the bridge of the patrol vessel Starlight Dawn, watching the quarantine zone around Vexor Prime on her display screen. Anything to report? She asked her crew. Nothing, Commander, replied her sensor officer. The target remained stationary in his dwelling. Same as always. Lisa nodded and turned back to the viewport. She had been watching Zorith for 2 years now, and in all that time, he had never done anything threatening. He simply existed, alone in the dark, waiting for something that might never come. She sometimes wondered if he was waiting to die. A sudden alarm broke through her thoughts. Commander, we have an emergency signal. A refugee transport called Mercy's Hope has lost engine power and is drifting toward the quarantine zone. Lisa's blood ran cold as she checked the trajectory on her screen. How many people on board? 347, including 62 children. They were fleeing the border conflicts in the outer sectors. Can we reach them in time? Her navigation officer shook his head with fear in his eyes. No, Commander, they will crash on Vexor Prime in less than 20 minutes. And we are over an hour away. Lisa slammed her hand against the console in frustration. 347 people were about to die on the doorstep of the most dangerous being in the galaxy, and there was nothing she could do to stop it on the surface of Vexor Prime. Zorith felt the vibration of the approaching ship long before it appeared in the sky. He raised his massive head, his eyes glowing like twin suns as he watched the vessel tumble through the thin atmosphere. It was a small ship by his standards, barely larger than one of his claws, and it was falling apart. As it descended, he could hear the screams of the creatures inside, their terror reaching him even through the vacuum of space. For a moment, he considered doing nothing. These were not his people, not his concern. Just more of the countless beings who feared and hated him for crimes committed centuries ago. But something stirred in his ancient heart. A memory of a time when he had been more than a monster. When he had protected rather than destroyed, he spread his wings and took flight. The ship crashed into a rocky valley 3 miles from his dwelling, breaking apart on impact and scattering debris across the gray landscape as Earth landed beside the wreckage, his massive form casting a shadow over the twisted metal. The screaming had stopped. He moved through the debris carefully, his claws gentle despite their size. Searching for any sign of life, he found bodies, so many bodies. Humans who had survived wars and hardship, only to die on his forgotten moon. Part of him felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Sorrow. He was about to turn away when he heard a small sound, barely audible even to his enhanced senses. Coming from beneath a pile of cargo containers, he pushed the metal aside and found a reinforced storage unit. Dented but intact, with a small window on one side. Through the window, a pair of bright green eyes stared up at him. Zorth froze inside the container was a human child. A tiny girl with brown hair and tears on her cheeks. Clutching a torn stuffed rabbit in her arms, she could not have been more than 5 years old. He had seen humans before. From a distance, small fragile creatures who built their ships and fought their wars and spread across the galaxy like seeds in the wind. But he had never seen one so small, so helpless, so completely at his mercy. The child stared at him without screaming, without running, without any of the terror he had come to expect from lesser beings. She simply looked at him with those bright green eyes and said in a tiny voice, "Are you going to help me?" Zorth did not know how to answer. He had not spoken to another living creature in over 100 years. Slowly, carefully, he reached down with one massive claw and tore open the container. The child did not flinch. She simply held up her arms. The universal gesture of a young one asking to be picked up. And waited. Zorth, the last of the Dracorians, the terror of the galaxy, the dragon who had watched worlds burn, looked at this tiny human girl and felt something break inside him. He did not know what to do, but he knew he could not leave her there to die. Lowered his head until his eye was level with her face, each of his eyes larger than her entire body, and rumbled softly, "I will help you, little one." The girl smiled. And for the first time in 800 years, Zorth felt something like hope. Her name, he would learn, was Lily Carter, and she would change everything. 2 weeks had passed since the crash, and Zorth still did not understand what he was doing. He had carried the tiny human girl back to his dwelling, a vast cavern carved into the heart of a mountain, filled with treasures and relics from 1,000 conquered worlds. The child had looked at everything with wide eyes, not fear but wonder, as if she had walked into a palace instead of the lair of a monster. "This is your house?" she had asked in her small voice. "It is so big." Zorth had not known how to respond. No one had ever called his prison a house before. In the days that followed, he learned that the girl's name was Lily Carter, that she was 5 years old, and that her parents had died protecting her during the crash. She did not fully understand what death meant, only that her mommy and daddy had gone to sleep and would not wake up, and that she was alone now. Except she was not alone. She had him. The thought terrified Zorth more than any battle he had ever fought. He was not equipped to care for a human child. His dwelling had no food she could eat, no water she could drink, no air she could breathe for long without growing sick. So he built for her using the ancient technologies of his people and the heat of his own breath. He constructed a small habitat inside his cavern, a bubble of warmth and oxygen where she could survive. He raided the crashed ship for supplies, gathering food packets and clothing and anything else that might keep her alive. All the while, Lily watched him with those bright green eyes and asked questions. So many questions. "Why are you so big?" "Because my people were made this way long ago." "Why does your skin glow?" "There is fire inside me, little one. Fire that has burned for 800 years. "Does it hurt?" Zorth paused at that question, surprised by her concern. "No," he said softly. "It does not hurt. That is good," Lily said with a smile. "I do not want you to hurt." He did not know what to say to that. As the days passed, Lily began to explore her new world with the fearless curiosity of the very young. She gave names to the treasures in his cavern, calling a crystal sphere her magic ball, and an ancient Dracorian blade her shiny stick. She was not afraid of him. Not even a little, and Zorith could not understand why one night, as she lay in the small bed he had made for her, she asked him a question that cut deeper than any weapon ever had. "Are you lonely?" Zorith was silent for a long moment. He had not thought about loneliness in centuries, had simply accepted his isolation as the price of his survival. "Yes," he finally admitted. "I have been lonely for a very long time." Lily nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense to her. "Me too," she said. "But now we can be lonely together. And then we will not be lonely anymore." Zorith felt something warm spread through his chest. Something he had thought died with his people. It felt like love a week later. Captain Nathan Brooks led a rescue mission to the edge of the quarantine zone, searching for survivors from the Mercy's Hope. "We are detecting one human life sign on the surface," his sensor officer reported. "But there is also a massive energy signature nearby, consistent with Dracorian biology." Nathan felt his heart sink. "The child is still alive?" "Yes, sir, but she appears to be inside the creature's dwelling." The crew exchanged worried glances. Everyone knew what Dracorians did to their prisoners. "Prepare a landing team," Nathan ordered, his voice heavy. "We have to at least try." But as they approached the moon, a warning signal flashed across their screens. The Dracorian was moving. "He is coming toward us," someone shouted, and panic filled the bridge. "Fall back," Nathan commanded. "Fall back now." The rescue ship fled, leaving Lily behind on the surface. Zorith watched them go with something like disappointment in his ancient eyes. He had not meant to frighten them. He had only wanted to see who was coming, to make sure they would not harm his little one. Yes, he realized with a start. His little one, when had he started thinking of her that way? He returned to the cavern to find Lily waiting for him, her stuffed rabbit clutched in her arms. "Did someone come?" she asked. "Yes," he said, "but they left." "Why?" "Because they are afraid of me." Lily tilted her head, confusion on her small face. "But you are not scary." "I was once," Zorith said quietly. "I did terrible things, little one. Things that can never be forgiven." "What things?" He looked at her for a long moment, wondering how to explain 800 years of war and death and regret to a child who still believed in magic balls and shiny sticks. "I hurt people," he finally said. Many people, because I was angry and because I did not know how to be anything else." "Are you still angry?" "No," he realized as he spoke the words. "I am not angry anymore." "Then you are not scary anymore," Lily declared with the simple logic of childhood. "People can change. That is what my mommy always said." She walked over to him and wrapped her tiny arms around one of his claws, her whole body barely as big as his smallest finger. "I am glad you are not angry anymore," she said. "I like you better this way." Zorith, the last dragon, the terror of 1,000 worlds, felt tears form in his eyes for the first time in centuries. "Lily," he said gently, "what am I to you?" She looked up at him and smiled. "You are my dragon," she said simply then. After a moment of thought, she added a word that changed everything. "You are my dad." Zorith did not correct her, did not tell her that he was a monster, that her real father had died in the crash, that no dragon could ever be a parent to a human child. He simply lowered his great head and let her hug him. This tiny girl who had walked into his darkness and found something worth saving far away, aboard the Starlight Dawn. Commander Lisa Morgan received a transmission that made her blood run cold. It was a child's voice, singing a human lullaby, accompanied by a deep rumbling hum that matched no known species in the galaxy. The song was beautiful, and it was coming from inside the dragon's lair. 3 months after the crash, the entire galaxy knew about the girl, and the Dragon Commander Lisa Morgan's discovery had spread across every news network, every communication channel, Every diplomatic briefing from one end of civilized space to the other, a human child was living with the most feared creature in existence. And no one knew what to do about it in the council chambers of the Galactic Union. Chaos ruled. This is an abomination. High Counselor Rex screamed, his 4 fists slamming against the table. That monster has taken a human child hostage. We must act now before he devours her. We have no evidence he intends to harm her, Ambassador Kira Walsh replied calmly, though her heart was racing. In fact, all our observations suggest he is protecting her. Protecting her? Rex laughed bitterly. Dracorians do not protect. They destroy. They conquer. They burn worlds to ash and dance in the flames. That was centuries ago, said Dr. Samuel Grant, a xenobiologist who had spent his entire career studying extinct species. Everything we know about Dracorian behavior suggests they were capable of deep emotional bonds, perhaps even stronger than our own. Were capable, Rex spat, before they murdered each other down to the last survivor. This creature is broken, dangerous, and unpredictable. We cannot allow a human child to remain in his clutches. On Earth, the reaction was equally divided. Some demanded immediate military action, while others called for patience and diplomacy. Parents everywhere watched the news with horror and fascination, imagining their own children in Lily's place. The human government officially demanded her return, but no one was willing to lead the mission to retrieve Heron Vexa Prime. Zorath knew nothing of the debates raging across the stars. He was too busy learning how to be a father. He had built Lily a proper home within his cavern, a comfortable space with a bed and a table and shelves for her growing collection of treasures. He had learned which food she liked and which she refused to eat, learned that she needed stories before sleep and songs when she was sad, learned that human children required an astonishing amount of attention and care, and he loved every moment of it. Tell me about the stars again, Lily would say each night, curled up against his massive claw like it was the safest place in the universe. So he would tell her about the worlds he had seen, the wonders and the beauties, leaving out the wars and the death and the fire. He told her about crystal forests that sang in the wind and oceans that glowed with living light and moons made entirely of precious gems. Have you been everywhere? She asked one night. Not everywhere, he admitted. There are still places I have never seen. Then we should go see them together, Lily declared. When I am bigger, we can fly everywhere and see everything. I would like that, Zorath said. And he meant it with all his ancient heart. Lily had changed him in ways he could not fully understand. Rage that had burned inside him for centuries had faded to embers, replaced by something gentler and more powerful. He no longer thought about the past, about the wars and the deaths and the endless killing. He thought about the future, about watching this tiny human girl grow up, about showing her the galaxy through eyes that had finally learned to see beauty again. But the galaxy would not leave them in peace. One morning, a small shuttle descended through the atmosphere and landed a safe distance from his dwelling. Zorath watched it carefully, ready to defend his daughter if necessary. But he did not attack. A human woman emerged from the shuttle, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. My name is Ambassador Kira Walsh, she called out. I am here to speak with you, Zorath, and to see the child. Zorath considered simply ignoring her, but Lily had already spotted the shuttle. Visitors. She squealed with delight. Running out of the habitat before he could stop her, she raced across the rocky ground toward the ambassador, her torn stuffed rabbit bouncing in her arms. Hi, I am Lily. Do you want to see my house? My dad built it for me. He can breathe fire. It is so cool. Kira Walsh stared at the child with tears forming in her eyes. This was not the traumatized prisoner she had expected to find. This was a happy, healthy little girl who clearly loved her strange guardian with all her heart. Your dad? Kira asked softly. Yes. Come meet him. He looks scary, but he is really nice. I promise. Lily grabbed the ambassador's hand and pulled her toward Zorth, who had approached slowly. His massive form blocking out the sky. Kira forced herself not to run up close. The Dracorian was even more terrifying than she had imagined, a creature of nightmares made flesh. Scales darker than space and eyes brighter than stars. But his gaze, when it fell on Lily, was unmistakably tender. "Why are you here?" Zorth asked, his voice a low rumble that Kira felt in her bones. "The human government wants Lily returned," she said carefully. "They are worried about her safety. And what do you think?" Kira looked at Lily, who was now showing off her drawings. Crude images of a giant dragon and a tiny girl holding hands. "Surrounded by stars and hearts, I think," Kira said slowly. "That I have never seen a child more loved." Zorth was silent for a long moment. "If you take her," he finally said, "what kind of life will she have?" "She will be a curiosity, a survivor, the girl who lived with the monster, and people will never let her forget it." "And what kind of life will she have here?" Kira asked, "Alone on a dead moon with no other humans, no school, no friends her own age." "She will have me," Zorth said simply. "I will protect her, teach her, love her until my last breath." Before Kira could respond, her communicator crackled with an urgent message. "Ambassador, a Tyrellian warship has entered the quarantine zone. They are claiming authorization from High Counselor Vrex to rescue the child by force." Kira's face went pale. "They are going to start a war," she whispered. His eyes began to glow brighter. And for the first time, Kira saw a hint of the ancient terror that had once conquered half the galaxy. "No," he said quietly. "They are not." Behind him, Lily grabbed his claw with both hands. Her small face determined, "I am not leaving." She announced to no one in particular, "This is my home, and he is my dad. And nobody is going to change that." The sky above them began to darken, as ships gathered at the edge of the atmosphere war was coming to Vexor Prime. The Tyrellian warship fired first day. Beam of white-hot energy screamed down from orbit and struck the ground 50 meters from Zorth's dwelling, sending rocks and dust flying in all directions. Lily screamed as the habitat shook around her. "Stay inside!" Zorth roared, but Lily was already running toward him, her small legs carrying her across the shaking ground. He caught her in his claw just as the second blast struck, shielding her body with his own as fire and debris rained down around them. "Dad!" Lily cried, clutching his scales with all her strength. "I am here," he said gently. Even his rage began to build in his chest. "I will not let them hurt you." High above, the Tyrellian commander watched the attack with satisfaction. "Continue firing," he ordered. "That monster killed my grandmother's entire colony during the wars. And today I will have my revenge." "Sir," one of his officers said nervously, "the human ambassador is still on the surface." "Then she should have left when she had the chance." "On the Starlight Dawn." Commander Lisa Morgan watched in horror as the attack continued. "We have to do something," she shouted. "They are going to kill that child." "Our weapons cannot match a Tyrellian warship," her tactical officer replied grimly. "If we interfere, we will be destroyed. Then contact Admiral Cole. Contact anyone. That little girl is going to die." But before she could send the message, something happened that no one expected. Zorth took flight. He erupted from the surface of Vexor Prime like a volcanic explosion, his wings spreading wide enough to block out the stars, his scales blazing with inner fire, his roar shaking the very fabric of space. The Tyrellian commander had never seen anything like it. His grandmother had told him stories about the Dracorians, but stories could not capture the sheer terror of seeing one in full fury. Zorth was not just big, he was ancient, powerful, and absolutely unstoppable. The warship fired everything it had at him: missiles, energy beams, kinetic rounds that could punch through planetary crusts. None of it mattered. Zorth moved through the barrage like it was nothing. his scales deflecting attacks that would have vaporized any other creature. His eyes locked on the ship that had dared to threaten his daughter in less than 30 seconds. He was upon them. His claws tore through the warship's shields like paper. Ripping away weapons and engines with surgical precision, he could have destroyed them in an instant. Could have burned every last Tyrellian to ash with a single breath, but he did not instead. He disabled the ship and left it drifting, powerless but intact. Every soul aboard alive and unharmed. Then he broadcast a message on every frequency, in every language. To every ship watching from the edge of the system, I do not want war. His voice rumbled across the void. I have had enough of war to last 1,000 lifetimes, but if you threaten my daughter again, I will show you why the galaxy once trembled at my name. Silence fell across the stars. Admiral Henry Cole arrived 3 hours later with a human fleet. Expecting to find a battlefield instead, he found the Tyrellian warship being towed to safety by Zorth himself. The dragon carrying the vessel as gently as if it were made of glass. What in the name of everything holy is happening here? Cole muttered as he watched the scene on his display. Ambassador Kira Walsh contacted him from the surface. Admiral, I think we need to reconsider our approach to this situation. Reconsider? That creature just single-handedly defeated a warship. And then he saved everyone aboard, Kira said pointedly. He could have killed them all, Admiral, and no one could have stopped him. But he chose mercy. Cole was silent for a long moment. What do you recommend? Let me try talking to him again, please. Cole did not want to agree, but he had no better options. Fine, he said finally. But if anything happens to you, I am authorizing a full assault. Kira returned to the surface to find Zorth standing guard over his dwelling, his massive form still and watchful. While Lily sat inside the damaged habitat drawing pictures, she is making a card for the people on the ship. Zorth said quietly, she wants to tell them she is sorry they got hurt. Kira felt tears prick her eyes. She is an amazing child. Yes, Zorth agreed. She is. They stood in silence for a moment. The vast dragon and the small human woman. Watching Lily work on her card. There is a man on one of the human ships. Kira finally said, Commander Victor Dunn. And he believes you must be destroyed no matter the cost. There will always be men like him. He has a prototype weapon. Something designed specifically to kill Dracorians. And I think he is planning to use it without authorization. Zorth turned his great head to look at her. Why are you telling me this? Kira took a deep breath. Because that little girl loves you. And I do not want her to lose another father. Before Zorth could respond, alarms began blaring across every ship, and the system commander Dunn had launched his weapon, a single missile streaked toward Vexor Prime, carrying a warhead specifically designed to penetrate Dracorian scales. A project that had been in development for centuries, just in case the last dragon ever became a threat. Zorth saw it coming and knew immediately what it was. He had seen similar weapons during the wars, had watched his brothers and sisters fall to them one by one. This missile could kill him. He turned to look at Lily, who had come outside when the alarm started. Her half-finished card clutched in her hands. She was staring at the sky, at the bright point of light growing larger by the second, and then she did something that no one expected. She ran not away from the danger, but toward it. She sprinted across the rocky ground with her arms spread wide, placing herself directly between the incoming missile and her father. Leave my dad alone, she screamed at the sky, her tiny voice echoing across the barren landscape. As Aerith felt his heart stop. Lily, no. He moved faster than he had in centuries, his ancient body pushed beyond its limits by a father's desperate love. The missile struck. There was a flash of light, a roar of sound, and then silence. When the dust cleared, Zorth was lying on the ground, his massive body wrapped around a small, unharmed human girl. His scales had absorbed the blast, but they were cracked and bleeding, golden blood pooling beneath him. "Dad?" Lily's voice was small and scared. "Dad, wake up. Please wake up." Across the system, every ship watched the scene in stunned silence. A tiny human girl, crying over the wounded body of a dragon, begging him not to die. Admiral Cole's voice was barely a whisper. "My God, what have we done?" The galaxy held its breath on every ship, on every station, on every world with access to a communication screen. Billions of beings watched the tiny human girl weep over the body of a wounded dragon. "Dad, please," Lily sobbed. Her small hands pressed against his cracked scales. "You have to wake up. You promised you would never leave me." Zorath lay motionless, golden blood seeping from a dozen wounds, his great eyes closed for a terrible moment. Everyone believed he was dead. Then his eye opened. It was dim, much dimmer than before, but it focused on Lily with unmistakable recognition. "I am here," he whispered, his voice so weak it barely carried. "I will always be here." Lily threw her arms around his snout, crying harder than she ever had in her young life. "I thought you were gone. I thought I lost you like Mommy and Daddy." "Never," Zorath promised. "You will never lose me, little one." Admiral Cole watched the scene with tears streaming down his weathered face. He had fought in a dozen wars, had seen horrors that would break lesser men, but nothing had prepared him for this, a child's love for her father, regardless of what that father looked like. Turned to his communications officer with steel in his voice. "Arrest Commander Dunn immediately, and get a medical team down to that surface now." "Sir, we do not have anyone trained in Dracorian medicine." "Then we learn." Cole snapped. That being just took a weapon meant to kill him to save a human child. "We owe him everything we can give." Dr. Samuel Grant was the first human to touch a living Dracorian in over 800 years. His hands trembled as he examined Zorath's wounds, but he forced himself to stay calm for Lily's sake. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, her green eyes red from crying. "I do not know," Samuel admitted honestly. "His biology is unlike anything I have ever seen, but he is strong, very strong. And I think he has something worth fighting for." He glanced at Lily, and she nodded seriously. "Me," she said. "He has me." "Yes." Samuel smiled gently. "He has you." The days that followed were unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Ships from a dozen species arrived at Vexor Prime, not with weapons, but with aid scientists, doctors, engineers, all working together to help a creature their ancestors have learned to fear and hate. They built medical equipment on the spot, designed treatments using theories and guesses and prayers, and through it all, Lily never left Zorath's side. She slept curled against his neck, sang him songs she remembered from her mother, told him stories she made up about brave dragons who saved princesses. "In my story," she said one night, "the dragon is the hero, and everyone loves him. And he lives happily ever after with his family." "That is a good story," Zorath murmured, his voice growing stronger each day. "It is our story," Lily corrected him. "And we are going to have a happy ending," I decided. Zorath huffed a small laugh. The first time he had laughed in centuries. "Then I suppose we will." 6 months later, Zorath stood before the Galactic Council for the first time in his long existence. The chamber that had once debated his destruction now welcomed him as a guest, though many of the representatives still watched him with fear in their eyes. He understood fear did not disappear overnight, but he was not here to demand respect or threaten war. He was here to ask for something he had never thought he would want again. "I am Zorath," he began, his voice filling the vast chamber. "The last of the Dracorians, and for 800 years, I have lived with the weight of my people's crimes." The council listened in silence. "I have killed more beings than any of you can count. Burned worlds, destroyed civilizations, and for all of this, I deserve no forgiveness. High Counselor Rex leaned forward, expecting an apology, a surrender, something he could use against the dragon instead. Zorith said something no one expected, but I am not here to speak of the past, because I have found something that matters more than all my centuries of shame. He looked down at Lily, who stood beside him in a new dress, her stuffed rabbit finally repaired, her face beaming with pride. I found a daughter, Zorith continued, a tiny human girl who saw past my scales and my fire and my terrible history, and decided I was worth loving. Tears appeared in eyes throughout the chamber. I am asking this council to recognize me not as a threat to be contained, but as a citizen of the galaxy, a father who wants only to raise his child in peace. I promise you that the dragon who once brought war to your doorsteps will spend his remaining years bringing only love. The vote was not even close for the first time in history. A Dracorian was granted full citizenship in the Galactic Union as they left the chamber, Lily riding on Zorith's shoulder as she loved to do. Ambassador Kira Walsh approached them. "What will you do now?" She asked. Zorith looked at his daughter, who was waving at passing diplomats like she was a parade float. "Whatever she wants," he said simply. "We have a lot of stars to see." A year after the crash that brought them together, Vexor Prime had transformed from a dead moon into a living world. The Galactic Union had approved a terraforming project, and already the first plants were taking root in soil that had been barren for millennia. Zorith flew through the growing atmosphere with Lily on his back, her laughter echoing across the landscape. "Look," she shouted, pointing at the horizon. "A ship. Can we wave at them?" Zorith turned so she could see the human colony vessel passing through their system on its way to a new world. Lily waved enthusiastically, and to Zorith's surprise, lights on the ship flickered in response. They knew who he was. They were waving back. "Dad?" Lily said as they landed beside their home, now surrounded by gardens and visitors from across the galaxy. "Are you happy?" Zorith considered the question carefully. For 800 years, he had known only loneliness, guilt, and despair. Now, he had a daughter who loved him, a home that was coming alive, and a future he actually wanted to see. "Yes," he said, lowering his head so she could slide down to the ground. "I am happy." Lily hugged his snout, as she did every day, and smiled up at him with those bright green eyes. "Good," she declared, "because happy dads make the best stories. And I want our story to go on forever." Zorith, the last dragon, the terror of legends, looked at his tiny human daughter and felt his heart overflow with love. "It will," he promised her. "For as long as the stars keep burning, our story will never end." And so the galaxy learned a truth that had been forgotten for too long. Family is not about blood or species or the shape of your body. It is about the souls who choose to love you and the souls you choose to love in return. A tiny human girl had looked at a monster and seen a father, and in doing so, she had changed the universe forever.